Hi, I'm Julia Beazley, Director of Public Policy with the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. For months now, the media have been telling story after story of people with disabilities, chronic illness, or chronic pain who are requesting MAiD, not because they want to die, but because they can't afford to live. It is unconscionable that in Canada, people would choose to die because they can't afford or can't access the care and supports they need to live and flourish. That it would be easier for people to access MAiD than the care and supports they need to live. But tragically, this is the reality, and this should be unacceptable to every Canadian. When the MAiD legislation passed in 2016, the government's rationale was to bring an earlier death for those who were experiencing pain and suffering at the end of life, whose death was reasonably foreseeable. But in 2021, with the passing of Bill C-7, a second track for MAiD was created, making people with disabilities or chronic illness who weren't dying eligible if they met the other requirements. This meant MAiD was now available to people because they had a disability, putting them outside of the protections offered to other Canadians. If I, as a non-disabled person, express a desire to die, the duty and hopefully impulse of the medical community is to intervene. They shouldn't suggest I end my life, and they cannot end it for me. But this same protection no longer exists for Canadians living with disability. This change in the law was overwhelmingly opposed by disability rights organizations who cautioned that extending MAiD to people with disabilities who are not dying gives the implicit message that their lives are not worth living. And in the time since this expansion, its reality and implications for the lives of Canadians living with disability have become chillingly clear. The lives of people with disability are being devalued and put at risk now. We need to reverse course on this. So we are joining with the disability community in calling for a repeal of Track 2 MAiD. We're also calling for a stop to the expansion of MAiD to those whose only underlying medical condition is mental illness. This expansion had been set to take place in March, but the Justice Minister has introduced legislation to delay it until March 2024. We are grateful for this reprieve, but it's just a reprieve. The Minister has made it clear the government intends to move ahead with MAiD for mental illness. This is just a delay to give time for medical professionals to prepare for the coming change. The existing safeguards are inadequate under our current reality, never mind with the immense additional complexity of mental illness alone. One of the safeguards in the law is that people must be informed of their treatment options, but only informed. They don't actually have to receive treatment. And in far too many cases, treatment or support could be at the end of a long waiting list. 1 in 10 Canadians looking for counseling services will wait more than 4 months for care. But the reflection period for Track 2 MAiD for those who aren't dying is just 3 months. This means 1 in 10 Canadians could access MAiD more readily in a more timely way than they could mental health care. We're already seeing a clear connection between poverty, food or housing insecurity, and MAiD for people living with disability or chronic illness. We know that people with mental illness also often have trouble accessing healthcare, housing, food, and employment. So if access is expanded, how many more Canadians, how many more of our neighbours will be pushed by circumstances to choose MAiD? A delay is not enough. We need to stop the expansion of MAiD for mental illness. I describe this as one of the most pressing and critical issues we are facing, not just in our policy work, but in our churches, our communities, and our country. We know it will take significant public outcry to bring about change. So this is an important moment to speak up, to join our voices with those who are most sharply and directly feeling the impacts of our laws. Those who are concerned should contact their MP and ask them respectfully and graciously to stop the expansion of MAiD for mental illness and to reverse Track 2 MAiD. Ask them how they will work to better support people with disabilities or mental illness. And as we call on the government to stop the expansion, to right this wrong, and ensure better support and care is available to all Canadians, let's also prayerfully consider what God would have us do as individuals, families, and churches to reach out and support those around us who may be struggling or feeling isolated. At the EFC, we realized we needed to think about these issues beyond just a policy level, that as followers of Jesus, we have to both work to counteract discrimination against people with disabilities in law and policy, and to also consider our attitudes and approaches to people with disabilities, to examine our own lives and church communities. And further than that, to make sure that our churches are places where the whole body of Christ is welcomed and belongs. The EFC is launching a new resource called Life Together, Disability and Belonging in the Church. In order to center the voices and gifts of people with disabilities, we asked people in the disability community to help identify what ableism in churches looks like and how and where we can begin to make changes. We are hopeful this resource, which will be available online and in booklet form, will have a big impact, inviting all of us to fuller community and greater belonging in the body of Christ. We have grieved and we continue to grieve at the devaluing and discarding of human life. That as a country, we're failing to provide care for those in vulnerable situations. And we really do believe this is a crucial time for the church to love our neighbors.